3 Sinister Stalker tales revealed, terrifying encounters with the cursed and haunted unseen. The night air crackled with tension. Maplewood was the kind of place where shadows crept just a little too close, where the leaves whispered secrets that sent chills racing down spines. Sarah, a tireless single mom of 2, had always believed her suburban refuge was a haven, where danger dared not tread. But that night? Were those warnings concealed within the darkness? Just as the diner felt a weight of emptiness, her phone erupted like a siren. Emily's frantic messages burst forth. "Mom. There's someone outside." A chill gripped Sarah's heart. She sent a quick reply dismissing it as a trick of the light, trying to shake off the ice curling around her stomach. But dread washed over her, a creeping wave. The diner smelled of grease and despair as she wiped down the counter, each swirl of her cloth feeling heavier. Emily's youthful imagination could run wild, right? But then, Sarah saw it, a flicker of movement in the reflection of the diner's glass, a dark silhouette skimming past. "Mama," the thought echoed, like a drum in her head, "that's not just a raccoon." Days became a blur, but the unsettling incidents crept in persistently. Books that should have been on the shelf turned up scattered, cold drafts howled through cracks, and Emily's wide-eyed terror followed her, a shadow of its own. "It's nothing, honey," Sarah reassured, unaware deep down that each innocent light she flicked on cast long, menacing shadows that seemed to linger just out of sight. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. An uneasy instinct clawed at her, pulling her deeper into the rabbit hole. Legends of shadowy figures stalking single mothers haunted her research, whispers of a curse wrapped around Maplewood like a shroud. The hairs on her arms stood tall as she read, each word bleeding dread into her reality. A cursed figure, they said, preying on those who stand alone. Maplewood was under her skin, and it festered. One night, burdened by her discoveries, she confronted the growing dread. Sunsets were a cruel tease, vivid reds and blues painting a deceptive tranquility. Those winds intertwined with lingering malice as the shadows shifted around her, clawing closer. Fear flooded her senses, twisting the air tight. Staring into that darkness, a figure emerged, its presence sent terror jolting through her. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves. She had to face it. But as she neared, trepidation morphed into disbelief, crashing into her like an avalanche. The figure that lurked at the boundary of the road bore an unmistakable resemblance. The man with the painterly smile, the one who trimmed his hedges from across the street, and offered friendly waves. This was the very essence of normality shattered. The harsh truth unfurled, and Sarah's world splintered like cracking glass. Her neighbors, sweet smiles and polite nods, were hiding from her a deeper horror. The true question loomed: was she the next victim or the next to serve as bait? The following days were a blur of paranoia and disbelief. The man with the smile haunted her thoughts, creeping into her dreams. Sarah tried to rationalize it. He couldn't be the thing from her nightmares, right? Perhaps it was just a case of panic skewing her perceptions. Yet, every glance at her neighbors felt like a dagger twisting in her gut. On a bleak morning, the sun struggled to break through the haze as she drove Emily and her younger brother, Toby, to school. The streets whispered names in the wind, and each house looked alive, watching from behind their curtains. As the kids stepped out, Emily turned back, her face pale. "Mom, I want to stay with you," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just go to class. I'll be watching from the front." But as she pulled away, Sarah's heart felt heavy in her chest, a knot of dread tightening with every beat. The clock ticked slowly as she returned to the diner. Each patron seemed like a specter, faces glazed with a far-off gaze, unaware of the growing shadows around them. She poured coffee, hands shaking, every clink of the cups echoing like a haunting whisper. Another flicker of movement captured her attention outside. She forced herself to look through the window, and there he was again, the smiling neighbor, trimming his hedges. No more than 50 feet away, the image of him became stark against the bright morning. A chilling wave rolled through her. His gaze was locked on her, unblinking. The lethargic suburban scene turned sinister, the ordinary ambience twisted into a pressure cooker of tension. Suddenly, a scream erupted from inside the diner, slicing through the air like glass shattering. A woman clutched her chest, eyes wide and terrified. There's a man in the parking lot. He's watching us. The room froze as all attention snapped toward the window, its glass a thin barrier between safety and horror. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She turned back to her neighbor, but he had vanished. Panic seized her. She rushed outside, the diner's entrance swinging violently as if it could force the danger back. "Where'd he go?" The woman gasped. "I swear he was just here." The parking lot lay empty, sun glinting off the pavement. All Sarah felt was the pounding of her heart, an insistent reminder of the tension coiling around her. No sign of him, only the overwhelming sense that something was deeply wrong, thrumming beneath the surface. "Mom!" Emily's voice pierced through her haze like a siren. The child was standing at the bus stop, Toby's hand clutched in her small grip. "We saw him too. He was right behind us." "Who, baby?" "The man. The one with the smile." Cold sweat covered Sarah as she gasped. "Where was the man?" "Let us go home," she said, urgency filling her tone. She turned abruptly, leading her kids away, fear clawing at her heels. But just as they approached the corner of Maplewood Street, something stopped them, a hidden motion at the edge of the woods. A figure stepped out, his smile wide, too wide. Sarah's breath hitched as she stared, body frozen in terror. The air was thick with unspoken dread. The warmth of the sun faded like a whisper into the chilling unknown. He was here again. What did he want? Questions raced like wildfire in her mind, but the answer loomed just beyond reach. As she clutched Emily and Toby tightly, the figure moved forward, the smile never faltering. "Why don't you come a little closer?" he called, voice dripping with a false kindness that screamed danger. Terror washed over her again, like icy water spilling down her spine. There was no chance to rationalize. No chance to escape. But who would he choose? Time hung in the balance, a second stretched into eternity, and uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. The truth was coming, and Sarah realized she might have to confront the monster hiding in plain sight. Would she be able to protect her children from the shadows, or would their laughter become echoes in the dark? "Don't move," Sarah whispered, barely daring to breathe. She could feel Emily trembling next to her, could hear Toby let out a soft whimper as their eyes pinned to the figure that stood at the edge of the woods. His smile, wide and unsettling, seemed to stretch impossibly. "Mom," Emily's voice was barely a whisper, laced with fear. "What does he want?" "I don't know, honey." "Just stay close," Sarah replied, her heart pounding like a rattling drum. The man took a step forward, and instinct kicked in. She yanked her children behind her, shielding them from whatever wickedness this monster harbored. Come on," she urged, her voice firm yet panicked. But her feet felt glued to the ground. The inviting warmth of the sun had turned into a chilling blanket, suffocating the air around them. The man's laughter came next, a haunting sound that echoed through the stillness, twisting the calm suburban landscape into a hellish nightmare. "Why rush off?" he taunted. "We were just getting acquainted." Sarah's skin crawled. The softness in his tone was unnerving, like he was reveling in their fear. "We don't want any trouble," she said, her voice trembling but steely. "Oh, but trouble seems to enjoy visiting you," he replied, tilting his head a little, that grin never wavering. "And I simply want to help." "What do you mean?" She couldn't help but ask, hoping that maybe, just maybe, understanding him might defuse the danger. My dear, you don't know what lurks in the shadows. The laughter of children like yours. He paused, savoring the shivers that ran through her. It attracts them. The ones who take what they want without asking. What are you talking about? Sarah shot back, steadier than she felt. But panic gnawed at the edges of her mind like hungry mice. With every heartbeat, she felt tethered to the moment, suspended in dread. Suddenly, his expression shifted, revealing something darker behind the mirage of kindness. But I can help you. All you have to do is listen, he continued, his voice becoming almost a whisper. The breeze shifted, and she felt cold fingers creeping along her spine. Before she could respond, Emily clutched her arm, wide-eyed. Mom, please, can we go home? It's all right, sweetheart, Sarah soothed, but her heart raced. In that instant, she felt helpless. Here stood the predator, revealing himself as some twisted savior. Without thinking, she took a step back, hands squeezing her children. It was an instinctive act of protection, but the smile didn't falter. It only widened as he took a step closer. Running away won't help, he called, his voice taunting, amused at their fear. They'll find you no matter where you go. Suddenly, a loud crack of a branch echoed from the woods behind him. Sarah's breath hitched. The very shadows he spoke of seemed to turn against him, rising into an ominous darkness. But then, just as quick, they faded back. It left a dreadful emptiness in its wake, almost as if the woods themselves were anticipating something sinister about to happen. Her heart thudded as she gripped her children tighter. We're leaving, she blurted, eyes darting to the path back toward their house. They turned, making a run for it, adrenaline surging through her veins. Don't say I didn't warn you. He yelled after them, the laughter echoing, growing fainter but ominously persistent, crawling under her skin. As they sprinted away, memories of that chilling smile began to blur with terror. Yet, a deep sense of foreboding nagged at her. The shadows in the woods seemed darker now, shifting like whispers left unspoken. The town had changed. The familiarity felt foreign, suffocating. They reached home, slamming the door shut behind them. Heart racing, Sarah locked it, the heavy sound slamming her chest, but she knew what lurked in the street might now want entry into her safe haven. Mom, what do we do if he comes? Emily said, eyes wide as she clutched Toby to her side. Sarah ran her fingers through her hair, trying to calm her fraying nerves. I don't know, baby. But we'll figure it out. We have to. The silence pressed heavily upon them, the walls now feeling like a cage. Every creak of the house put her on edge. She glanced out the window, her heart pounding as she fought the urge to look, but a movement made her freeze. The man stood at the edge of the driveway, staring, grinning, waiting. And then, she noticed something. He wasn't alone. Shadows gathered behind him, twisting and coiling like smoke, more ominous and alive than before. The weight of dread crushed her, and in that moment, she understood this was only the beginning. What was about to come next? The silence was shattering. The air thickened, pressing in on Sarah and her children, making every breath feel like a struggle. The man stood there, a figure wrapped in the shadows, as they danced around him like loyal pets. His grin cut through the dim light, cruel and twisted. Why are you hiding? He called, his voice a melody of mockery. It's no fun when you don't engage. Emily clutched onto Sarah's leg, tremors rippling through her small frame. Despite the dread pooling in her stomach, Sarah forced herself to move closer to the window, heart hammering in her chest. As she peered through the curtain, the shadows writhed and pulsed, coiling around thick tree trunks. Wisps of darkness seemed to breathe, growing bold, inviting and threatening all at once. Mom, please. Toby whimpered, burying his face against her side. Stay down, guys, Sarah whispered, her voice threatening to crack. She could sense something dark lurking just beyond the edge of their sanctuary. don't you know? His voice floated in again, smooth and syrupy. You can't hide from the things you fear most. I can show you. Show us what? Her voice rose, emboldened by a mix of anger and fear. What do you want? Just your company, he crooned, tilting his head in a way that made her stomach twist. I can help you, Sarah. This town, it's an old friend of mine. We go way back. Insisting on keeping her eyes on him, she watched in horror as he reached underneath his coat, pulling out something dark, something that glimmered in the fading light. A silver chain, perhaps? No, it was too thick, too heavy. He dangled it, letting it swing as if it had its own will. Do you see now? He said, voice draping over her like a heavy blanket. There's always a price for knowledge, for protection. The shadows began to stretch and shudder, seemingly alive with his intent. Sarah could feel each heartbeat reverberate in the air, the pulse of something wicked and ancient ready to consume them. She jerked away from the window as if it burned. Mom! What does he mean? Emily's voice was cracking, panic lacing her words. I don't know, sweetheart. Sarah hissed, fighting to keep her voice steady. We have to stay quiet. But beneath the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, something felt off, a thudding eeriness in the silence that followed. The man's taunts morphed into sinister whispers, creeping into her mind like angry vines. Let us make a deal. A bargain that will protect you from what watches beyond the veil. His voice faded in and out, echoing unnaturally, unsettlingly. What are you saying? Sarah shot back, desperation in her tone. We don't want any deals. Just go away. And then, without warning, he stepped forward, breaking the boundary between her safe space and the growing malevolence outside. Sarah bolted back, blindly grabbing her children, shoving them away from the window. Mom! What's happening? Toby cried, fear almost palpable in the air. A wind swept through the house, tangible and cold, fluttering papers off the counter, sending pictures rattling against their frames. The sound of laughter echoed, children's laughter, merry and haunting, spilling into her ears from the darkening street. Fear kicked in, triggering something primal. She couldn't wait for him to come knocking on the door. Get the phone. Sarah urged, her mind racing through emergency plans. We have to call for help. But as she reached for the phone on the counter, a shriek erupted from Emily, cutting through the air like glass shattering. Mom! The door! Heart slipping into her stomach, Sarah spun around. The man turned away from the window, shadows trailing behind him as he lifted a hand. Then, slowly, he knocked. One sharp rap against the front door echoed through the house, icy and fat with dread. Do you hear that? He called, voice low and thick. They're coming, and I can promise you, they'll love what you've held on to. The ominous grins of the shadows danced at the edges of her sanity, and in that moment, she knew the truth, the real terror had only just begun. What would she sacrifice to keep her children safe? Toby's eyes were wide, brimming with tears, as he clutched tightly to his mother. The air twisted, thick with foreboding, while the man's laughter echoed through the stillness. Sarah's heart raced painfully in her chest, threatening to burst as the dread settled around them like a shroud. Please, this isn't funny. She yelled, sounding weaker than she'd hoped. The knocking stopped, leaving a suffocating silence that gnawed at her sanity. Open the door, Sarah. I'm not a monster, he taunted, his voice dripping with false sweetness, oozing through the cracks of her fractured mind. Monsters don't knock, remember? Mom! Emily whimpered, tugging at Sarah's shirt as if it was the only lifeline left. What do we do? We wait, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Just stay quiet. Just as the shadows quieted, a hair-raising sound sliced through the silence, a faint scratching, like nails on wood, clawing at the back of her mind. Ah, but silence is so boring. The man's voice pierced through the darkness again, growing closer, more immediate. Why don't you let me in? Together, we can shake off this gloom. The windows rattled violently as if the very house trembled at his words. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. Don't answer him, she snapped. But desperation crept in. Could she keep them safe? An icy wind swept through the house, chilling them to the bone, flickering the lights. Her heart froze for a moment as she remembered a warning: always keep out the things that knock. Then came the thudding, relentless, a deep rhythm that echoed with her own heartbeat. It drummed from outside, dripping with dread, begging for recognition. Each knock on the door echoed deeper into the shadows, which now began to drip like ink from a page. Let us have a game, shall we? He called, voice weaving in and out of reality, mingling with the creaking of the house. I'll count to 3, and if you're not ready, well, let us just say they might not be so gentle. Tremors coursed through Sarah as she exchanged a glance with her children. Where will we go? She wondered, the question hanging in the air like a noose. I can show you, Sarah, he purred, his voice wrapping around her like a serpent's coil. Her mind raced through options. The basement? A closet? Anywhere but here. But that would only prolong the encounter. A single breath escaped her lips, laden with dread. 1. 2. She felt the darkness lurch forward, hungry for their fear. No. Not today. With newfound grit, Sarah pulled her children closer and squinted through the shadows. But as the third knock landed, a crack splintered through the door, sending splinters flying. Panic ignited. Mom! Toby screamed as she instinctively threw her body between him and the door, every instinct screaming at her to protect them, to fight back against whatever evil had seeped into their lives. Run! She roared, adrenaline surging as she imagined every terrible thing behind the door. Go to the back. Now! Emily grabbed Toby's hand, both too young to truly understand, yet saturated with primal fear, and darted for the hallway. But as Sarah turned to follow her children, the shadows shifted into something solid, a twisted mass pulling her back. Don't leave me, she heard the man's voice whisper through the darkness, a chant that grew louder and more insistent. If you do, they won't survive. The air thickened again, olives bursting, her thoughts melting into cries of warning. But in that crucial moment, she realized she could see the fading outlines of her children sprinting away. And then the door splintered, shattering like glass. What would the man let slip through the threshold, and more importantly, would Sarah manage to reclaim what was waiting on the other side of that open door? Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, drowning out the chaos that threatened to engulf her. The wooden door ripped apart, its shambles flying inward as a figure stepped through the jagged opening. This wasn't just a man, he radiated malice, shadows wrapping around him like a grotesque cloak. His grin sliced across his face, sharp and unnerving. Frantically, Sarah turned, sprinting toward the hallway, hoping to catch her children before the darkness swallowed them whole. Emily! Toby! Stay close! She screamed, urgency ripping through her voice. But the house twisted and turned, each step echoing like thunder in her ears, confusing her senses. Where had they gone? The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with dread, as if they were alive and imbued with the very essence of the monster behind her. Mommy! Toby's voice cried out, thin and terrified. Here! I'm coming! She raced toward the sound, heart racing as terror swept through her veins. Each swift step felt like a countdown, a fleeting chance to save them. Then came the laugh again, cruel, and came from all directions. Hiding is no fun, you can't escape. She skidded to a halt at the kitchen entry, eyes darting wildly. Moonlight spilled through a grimy window, illuminating the fear etched on her children's faces. They huddled beneath the table, whispering frantic, innocent prayers. She reached them just as a shadow passed, stretching like a frayed thread toward her. Get up! We need to go! She urged, wrangling them upwards. But as they pressed against her, the air grew heavier, suffocating, thickening with dread. The laughter swelled again, more disturbing than before. "You can't run from me." The walls trembled alongside Sarah's rising panic. With trembling hands, she restrained her fear and peeked outside the kitchen door's cracked opening. The figure now lounged against the shattered door frame. Dark eyes glinting, assessing, reveling in the chaos he'd unleashed. "Oh, I'll find you, don't you worry," he cooed, voice oozing through the cracks like poison. Each word had weight, heavy enough to tug at her very soul. "Out the back." Sarah hissed, adrenaline coursing through her as she pushed Emily and Toby toward the looming rear exit. "Now!" They bolted, but just as Sarah turned to follow, the man lurched forward, his footfall echoing ominously. "No use running. I have you always." Time slowed as Sarah bounced against the doorframe, body screaming as she struggled to suppress her rising panic. The walls seemed to close in around them, urging her to abandon hope. She could almost feel the tendrils of darkness creeping in, coaxing her despair. "Mommy!" Emily's voice quivered against the air thick with tension as the door creaked ominously. "Stop! Stand back!" Sarah yelled, finding a shard of courage. "He can't have you." With a sudden burst, she yanked the door open, and they surged outward into the night. The air was a stark, cold slap, mixing the scent of damp earth with fear. No streetlights flickered here, just shadows. The woods loomed ahead, dark and enveloping, their secrets concealed by an unsettling quiet. "Run toward the trees," she urged, pushing them forward. But as they stumbled, a hand clamped down on her shoulder, cold, clammy, and tightening. "Going somewhere?" The man's voice hissed right behind her, dripping with vicious delight. The world spun as Sarah turned, face to face with the grim specter of a nightmare. Her children were still ahead, but her body felt rooted to the ground, overwhelmed by an unrelenting dread. Then she realized the truth: the shadows were not just stalking them, they were beckoning her more deeply into the darkness with every heartbeat. "Don't look back," she shouted, forcing energy into her limbs. But doubt seeped in. Could she fight against the shadows and save her children? Or would she succumb to what waited on the other side of fear? As they scrambled into the depth of the trees, branches clawing at them like teeth, the laughter erupted once more, a symphony of terror that promised they wouldn't escape unscathed. And then there was silence, a whisper of something ancient and sinister floating through the air, pulsing with the blood in her veins. She had to keep moving, but part of her wanted to know what horrors awaited them deeper in the woods. The shadows swallowed them as they plunged into the woods, branches snapping underfoot, the crunch echoing like gunfire in the night. Sarah's breath came in frantic gasps, her heart racing against the constant threat of darkness. "Keep running," she shouted, her voice strained, feeding off the terror that chased them. Toby stumbled, catching his foot on a root, yanking Emily down with him. "Mommy!" They both cried, faces painted with sheer horror, and time frayed, stretching between them and the nightmare looming just beyond the trees. "No!" Sarah rushed back, every instinct screaming to save them, even as dread rippled through her. "Get up! We have to move." With shaky hands, she helped them back to their feet, eyes darting to the threatening woods. She could feel it, the lurking presence was closer now, a darkness that thickened the air, pushing against her body as if trying to squeeze the very life from her. "Which way?" Emily shivered, glancing back over her shoulder, eyes wide and wet with terror. "Keep going. Just run." But as she yelled, the laughter returned, warped and cruel, weaving through the trees like a hunting wolf. Sarah bolted forward again, her mind racing. "We can't stop. Just keep moving." They dashed deeper into the foliage, branches swiping at their faces, ripping at their clothes, the moonlight fading behind the canopy. The looming trees closed around them, shrieking whispers dragging at the edges of her sanity. Each step further felt like stepping into a dark hole, a pit that threatened complete darkness. Behind them, the figure slipped into the shadows, each footfall silent yet terrifyingly close. "You can't escape what has already claimed you," he taunted, voice slicing through the night air, dredging cold fear from her bones. "Mommy. What does he mean?" Toby gasped, clutching her hand tighter, knuckles white. "I don't know, honey. Don't listen to him." She forced her voice to be strong, though it crumbled around the edges. They turned, trying to navigate the labyrinth of trees that twisted and warped as if alive. Sarah felt her grip loosening on Hope. The forest seemed to close in, swallowing their voices, their presence, and then, a shriek high and piercing echoed through the trees, freezing her blood. It wasn't just the man's laughter now. She turned, searching the darkness while the weight of dread pressed heavily on her chest. Something else lurked in the depths of the forest, something that hungered while they ran. "Mommy!" Emily screamed again as shadows shifted, writhing, revealing twisted forms between the trees. They passed like phantoms, flickering in and out of existence, watching with vacant eyes. "What are they?" Toby shivered, growing pale, clutching Sarah's leg. "Stay behind me," she ordered, energy draining faster than the hope flickering in her chest. Why had they come this way? Why didn't they stay inside where it was safe? Suddenly, a low growl vibrated into the air around them, rumbling from the depths of the woods. It twisted her stomach, and she whipped around, heart racing. She was hyper-aware of every sound, every rustle, every breath. "Don't. It will." Before she could finish, something lunged from the shadows. Overhead, a dark figure descended, its weight heavy enough to shake the ground even before it landed. The laughter rang out one last time, then silence fell like a shroud, encompassing Sarah and her children. The eyes of the figure glimmered in the moonlight, glinting with insatiable hunger. And then she forgot her own voice as every ounce of fear congealed into a single thought. Survival meant fighting against this suffocating dark, but how could they survive against something that knew them so intimately? Should they hide? Fight? Run? But beyond the shivers of her own thoughts, haunts delved deeper. A soft whisper coiled around her, an echo of familiarity, a temptation ignited within. "Come to me." As they stood frozen, the figure beckoned, pulling her against the instinct that screamed to run. In that moment, Sarah realized she was teetering on the edge of a decision that could alter their fates. Forever. What if the only path to safety was to embrace the darkness? Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, a primal sound urging her forward, yet the figure's whisper twisted her thoughts, burrowing deep into her mind. It beckoned like a sweet poison, and despite her terror, she felt something familiar stirring within her. "Mommy." Emily's voice, small and frightened, pulled her back from that brink, from a darkness that promised safety at a terrible price. "Run. We need to run." She yanked at Toby's hand, leading them away from that sinister presence. The laughter faded, replaced by an unsteady silence that felt worse than the cacophony they had just fled. They sprinted deeper into the woods, branches clawing at them, as if the dark itself wished for them to remain trapped in its embrace. The twisted forms flickered at the edges of her vision, but she refused to look, focusing instead on the flickering moonlight ahead like a lighthouse in a storm. "Mommy, I can't breathe." Toby gasped, his small lungs straining against the chill of the night air. "It's too dark." "I know, baby. Just hold on." Gathering her resolve, Sarah pushed them forward, adrenaline fueling every step. But doubt clawed at her thoughts. What if they were too far gone? What if the shadows and the laughter had already claimed them? Suddenly, a snap echoed from close behind. She turned, and for a fleeting moment, a glimpse of the figure stood between the trees, eyes burning in the dim light. It watched her with patience, every feature hidden in the murk, yet its hunger was palpable, thickening the air around her. "Mommy, please don't let it catch us," Emily whimpered, glancing back as the laughter flickered to life again, echoing around them like a cruel joke. "Not going to let that happen. Not ever." Sarah's words rang out fiercely, though her heart threatened to shatter under the weight of her breathless fear. They raced around a massive oak, its gnarled roots jutting from the ground like skeletal hands, begging for flesh. In that moment, Sarah spotted an opening, an old hunting shelter half collapsed, barely held up by vines and its unsettling history. "Quick, here!" she shouted, directing them inside as the overwhelming terror of the woods hungrily licked at their heels. Once inside, the scent of damp wood and dirt enveloped them, a brief sanctuary, but suffocating in its stillness. "Are we safe?" Toby's voice trembled, and she could almost sense the fatigue weighing on him. "For now," she whispered, though the darkness outside began to swirl, feeling more alive than before. As her hands searched for something, a branch, a weapon, they brushed against a jagged piece of wood. It would have to do, then. A clawing noise erupted from the door, followed by a low, menacing growl. It was close. Too close. The heaviness pressed down on her, pushing her breath shallow. She strained to listen as the sounds outside became deliberate, focused on their shelter, a wolf circling a wounded lamb. "Mommy! What do we do?" Emily begged, her small voice quivering in the thick tension. "Shush," Sarah hissed, gripping Toby tighter. "We wait, we listen." But waiting felt like a betrayal in itself, a loud invitation for the shadows to take what they would. Panic began to rise like bile in her throat. She could sense the figure beyond the door, lingering with a knowing that sent ice through her veins, and as the night deepened, she felt the weight of the forest pressing in. It wasn't just the stalker outside. It was something else, something that pulsated in the very walls of the shelter, filling her with a sense of impending doom. What if they didn't just have to survive the man? What if they had to survive what he had brought with him? In the silence broken only by the heavy breathing of her children, a realization struck her: perhaps the darkness had an insatiable hunger not just for them, but for something far more sinister. Like a chain pulled taut, she knew a moment was coming. A moment that would demand action, a choice that might rip them apart or bind them together in desperation. The whisper came again, softer this time, yet unmistakably potent. "Come to me." And Sarah thought. In that moment, what else could the darkness unveil? What had it gathered in its unholy embrace? The door trembled, and she steeled herself against the uncertainty of both the world outside and the terror lurking within. What awaited them next? As the door quaked under the weight of whatever prowled outside, Sarah's fingers clenched the jagged piece of wood tighter, feeling the splinters bite into her palm. The growl faded into an unsettling silence, as if the entity was contemplating its next move, or perhaps, biding its time. Her heart raced, pounding like a war drum, urging her to act, but frozen by the fear gnawing at her soul. "Mommy!" Emily's tiny voice barely broke the thick atmosphere. It was a delicate whisper, yet it held volumes of dread, deeper than words could express. "Should just stay close." Sarah felt the cold grip of helplessness settling around her. It had only taken one moment in those woods to release the panic into her body, and she could feel it coiling tighter each second. One heavy breath. Then another. The shelter creaked, old wood struggling against the weight of the night. With each pulse of ominous stillness, Sarah sensed the shadows shifting, whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear, and then the scratching resumed. It was now accompanied by soft, rhythmic thuds, a pulse of something lurking, pacing back and forth like a predator surveying its prey. The air thickened. It felt as if every breath she took was pulling the darkness closer. "Mommy, I see it." Toby gasped, his wide eyes reflecting primal terror. "In the corner." Sarah's gaze flicked instinctively, but she saw nothing, just the oppressive darkness filling every crevice of the room. But deep down, she knew. Something was there, something that had taken root in their sanctuary, thriving off their fear. She glanced back at her children, both trembling with dread, and the thought struck her. Whatever was outside was one thing, but if whatever lurked within that shelter embraced the chaos, it could take everything from her. A choice loomed large before her face: the monster outside or confront the one inside that fed off their very life force. The whisper began again, more insistent now. "Emily." A chill coursed through Sarah. Her daughter's name rolled off a tongue sharper than glass, taunting. "No. Stay away from her," she hissed, her voice rising in defiance. But that same sweetness crept back in her ears, charming yet poisonous. Suddenly, the door splintered under another heavy push, a dark silhouette briefly visible. Shadows dripped from its sides like wet ink, and an overwhelming sense of dread filled the space. She readied her weapon, but what good would it be against something that lived in nightmares? "Mommy, I'm scared." Toby squeezed her hand tighter. A single tear rolled down his cheek, illuminated momentarily by the shifting moonlight. I know," her breath hitched, a mix of determination and despair. And in that moment, she realized their survival relied on misdirection. "Quick, we need to create a noise," she urged, her mind racing. If whatever lingered beyond the door was enticed by their fear, she would give it something else to focus on. "Make noise," she shouted, startling her children as she began to pound her fists against the damp wooden wall, echoing a desperate rhythm of chaos. "Mommy, no!" Emily cried, panic lining her words. But Sarah pressed on, her heart racing, convincing herself that clinging to this small act of defiance was enough to buy them time. The scratching at the door stilled, a thick tension settling in the waning silence. They listened, breaths held, hearts pounding in unison, and then it replied. A low and twisted laughter echoed from the other side, a chilling sound that seemed to spiral into the deepest recesses of her mind. Come out, wherever you are," the taunt echoed, and Sarah's stomach twisted violently. How could she fight what she could not see? A moment of clarity flashed. "We have to get out, now." With the old shelter trembling beneath them, Sarah pushed through the worry flooding her thoughts and turned towards the fractured door. But then came another sound, a scream, piercing and unearthly, reverberating through the night, not far from their location. What was that? Toby whimpered, eyes wide with fear. "I don't know." Panic surged through Sarah. They had to move, yet something deeper clawed at her instincts. They were no longer alone, the terror in the woods growing in strength and numbers. It was a race against the gathering darkness, but what awaited them in the woods didn't merely hunger for flesh. "Follow me," she commanded, heart thundering, as they plunged into the unknown. What had awoken in the night? As they sprinted away, shadows danced at their heels, hungry for their screams. And as the forest consumed them, one dreadful thought lingered: did they even stand a chance against the horrors that stirred in the dark? Something else was already at work, something ancient and savage, and it wouldn't stop until it had claimed its due. The oppressive darkness wrapped around Sarah and her children, squeezing tighter with every frantic step they took. Every rustle of leaves whispered of dangers hidden among the twisted branches. She was running on pure instinct now, adrenaline propelling her deeper into the shadows. "Mommy, I'm scared," Toby cried, slipping on loose earth. Sarah didn't look back but felt his small body falter. Instantly, she stopped, bending to scoop him up in one swift motion, feeling her heart thud painfully in her chest. Emily surged ahead, her little legs pumping as tears streamed down her face. "Hold on tight," Sarah shouted, clutching Toby against her side, and sprinted after her daughter, fear propelling her forward. The laughter from the man echoed in her mind, a chilling melody that sent waves of dread crashing through her. "Keep going. We have to find a way out," she urged, knowing she needed to protect them. But then the world split open around her, a sharp pain sliced through the air as branches lunged at them, clutching like skeletal hands. The whispers swirled, urging her to stop, to listen, growing louder as the shadows twisted into menacing forms. Toby's whimper made her head spin. "Mom! There's something in the trees." "I know, just hold on." She pushed forward, following Emily through a twisted path that felt both familiar and foreign, disoriented by the night. In the distance, she could see flickers of light, a welcoming beacon against the night, but every breath felt heavy with impending dread. "Mommy! Please!" Emily cried out again, and the urgency in her voice snapped Sarah back to focus. Suddenly a low growl vibrated through the air, reverberating deep within her chest. They were being hunted. Sweat dripped down her back as she picked up the pace, fingers tightening around the jagged wood, willing it to be enough for protection. With one desperate glance over her shoulder, the figure stood at the edge of the trees, watching, waiting, that twisted grin illuminating the darkness. Something stirred in the shadows beside him, like a pulse of darkness alive with hunger, something she couldn't afford to comprehend. Into the clearing, she shouted, urging her children to run faster. The flickering light was closer now, she could almost taste safety. Every instinct screamed at her to push through, to jump into the bright void waiting just beyond. But as they stumbled forward, Sarah realized something wasn't right. The growl had morphed into a collective howl of sinister joy that echoed all around them. They burst into the clearing, where the moon hung low and heavy. A strange silence enveloped them, all sounds cut short as reality shifted. The light from the moon spilled onto the ground, illuminating what appeared to be a gathering of shadows swirling, pulsating as if they had a life of their own. Mom Emily's voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear. Toby clung tighter, whimpering. "Stay close," Sarah commanded, the urgency in her voice firm as she attempted to shield them from whatever horror loomed ahead, and then it struck her this was a moment. A moment to fight back against the darkness. A deep inhale filled her lungs with renewed determination. "You will not take my children," she shouted into the expanse of darkness, her voice drowning out the cacophony of whispers crowding her mind. "I am not afraid." The shadows writhed in response, pulsing dangerously, hunger dripping from their forms. Suddenly, the man's voice broke through, smooth and chilling. "You challenge the darkness, Sarah? How noble, how foolish. Enough of your games. You're not welcome here." She gripped the jagged wood tighter, heart racing as she prepared for whatever was about to emerge. The man stepped forward, shadows wrapping around him like serpents. "Do you think defiance will protect them?" In that moment, she remembered the tales of those who faced the darkness before her. It wasn't just about fear, it was about strength, a strength that pulsed within her, fueled by the love for her children. And in the core of that love, she found her voice again. "No!" she bellowed, freaking out. The shadows that seemed to consume the very air. "We stand together." What happened next was a blur, a rush of movement, the world spinning as the shadows lunged, hungry for their terror. But Sarah, filled with fierce determination, knew they wouldn't take her family without a fight. She swung the jagged wood toward the shadows, an echo of her fear giving way to fierce courage. A visceral jolt surged through her, connecting her with the spirit of those lost before. The shadows recoiled, seeming to hiss at her, retreating as if struck. "You cannot win," the man sneered, his voice low yet strained, as if he felt the balance shift. But Sarah pressed on, blocking the darkness, inching forward. "We are not afraid of you," she shouted, launching the jagged wood deeper into the mass of shadows, and in that moment, the ground trembled, and the air thickened with energy. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of rage and fear that resonated deep within her core. Emily and Toby huddled against her legs, their breath shaky yet full of resolve, and slowly, something shifted. The gathered shadows turned to mist, swirling angrily before dissipating into the night. Retreating from the confrontation, Sarah stood unyielding, body trembling with the effort, but triumph surged through her veins. "You have no hold over us," she called into the void, the man's figure flickering like a candle in the wind. His smile faltered, the hunger in his eyes fading. "You may have won tonight, but I will return." But as the last of the shadows slithered away, Sarah turned, her children leaning against her, their fear slowly giving way to relief. She grasped their shoulders, pulling them close, sealing their victory with a fierce embrace. "We did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "We're safe." Then, as dawn light began to break, coloring the sky with soft pastels, she felt the warmth of hope unfold within her. No matter what the man promised, they were free, and Maplewood, her home, would never be the same. But now they had a choice. The shadows were gone for now, but that darkness could still linger. They wouldn't forget. "We're going to be okay," she said, looking into both their teary eyes, determination swirling in her own. "Together. "We'll be okay." As they walked back through the clearing toward the warming light of morning, Sarah realized they had not just survived an encounter, they had reclaimed their story, a bond stronger than any darkness. And while shadows may lurk, they knew now that courage would always shine brighter. It was over, but stories never truly end. They linger, waiting to be told, begging for connection. And when they do return, they must be ready, because once you've stared into the abyss, it has a way of whispering your name. So, remember, dear viewers, as this chapter draws close, this is where everything shifts. Don't let fear anchor you down, embrace your own light, and share your tales. Now, if you enjoyed this heart-pounding conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel for more exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and support the channel in bringing more pulse-pounding tales your way. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this shocking conclusion. Your thoughts matter. And finally, wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this pulse-quickening finale. Real fans know the power of community. So rally your people and let us keep the stories alive.